brain energy right now with the icebreaker. So, could we get to the first slide, please?
Cheryl, before you do that, could you go over the keeping the, silencing their phones and stuff?
Sure. Yes, so just a reminder, housekeeping reminders, please put your cell phones on mute. Please put yourself on mute if you have activity going in and out of your offices, because it echoes back at us and other participants wouldn't be able to hear. And also we will have a 10-minute break after Rachel's presentation, so we'll be able to take a break then. So again, thank you for coming. Next slide. Next. And there it is. Use the chat features to add your comments or questions as Charlie announced. Please ask your questions after the speaker has finished. Sit down, listen, and enjoy the meeting. This message is being recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Welcome. Okay, back one slide, please. So the reason why I was talking about putting your thinking caps on is we're going to play an icebreaker game. It's going to be called Name That Screen. So again, please no shouting out. If you want to put a response, we're going to get the quickest response first and second place. Either raise your hand with the icon at the bottom of you in the center of your screen, your monitor, or put your response in the chat. Okay, so again, this is going to take brain cells, your keyboard, your monitor, refreshing memory, raise your hand, and quiz questions. Next slide. Okay, this is going to be a game to test our knowledge of PMMIS. Be quick and have fun. The icons that are showing are examples of some of the questions that will be asked. It's not in any particular order. It's just an example of different screens within the PMMIS system that I will be asking. And again, have fun. Next screen. The first question is, I am the screen that supports combinations of access, operations, administrative activities, and recording requirements. The timer's on. First to respond either in the chat or raise your hand. What screen does this function? Unknown. We got one answer. Two. Okay.
Two.
Unknown.
We got unknown and
Ernestine. Awesome. Okay. Please present the answer. All right. Way to go. Unknown and Ernestine. Okay. The next question.
Who is unknown?
Okay.
Joni. Okay.
Joni. All right. Okay. This is the informational screen of what provider is eligible to render to an ALTCS provider. Here you go. Come on, come on. Unknown. Woo. Let's see. One more, one more. 30 seconds is almost up. Double points for unknown. Just kidding. Come on, come on. Okay. Please reveal the answer. All right. Great job, unknown. PR035 is the provider provider categories of service screen. That is where you'll find what all the services that said provider is eligible to bill for. Next slide. Okay, the screen displays the maximum rate for all 5 procedure digit codes, also including HCBS services and DME. What screen am I?
Diana, raise your
Diana?
hand.
CA160 screen.
CA160. Not correct. Somebody else?
There, Ernestine.
Okay, good job, Ernestine.
And Joni.
Okay. Let's reveal the answer. Woo! Correct answer is RF112, the procedure maximum allowable charge. You can go look at your, using the procedure code, look up what is the current allowable charge for any item regarding DME, HCBS services, PT, things like that. Thank you very much. Great job. Next slide, I'm sorry. Okay, for data entries to be made and accepted on PMS, what letter must not be used?
Unknown.
One more.
Is that unknown Joni still?
Yeah, I believe so. And it is not C.
All right.
Yes. So
Okay.
Niana,
The answer,
Niana
please.
and Joni.
Answer, please. That is right. The inquiry function. If you use that, you press enter, you'll get an error message that says edit code /message -Z019, no action taken. Then you have to start all over. Okay, next slide. All right, this is interesting. A hacker identified himself from the Medi-Cal, which is California's Medicaid health program. He is holding all our weekly reports for ransom. What screen are you going to identify which tribal case managers cases are due for that said month? Go. Woo! Ernestine's quick. All right, unknown.
Joni and Niana.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, I had to take it back old school, and we have some veteran seasoned case managers here that identified that answer correctly. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Ready to go. Okay. The monthly data for a member is displayed on the screen. Data is available on the Access Customer HIA Plus / also known as Eligibility A System, not necessarily for every calendar month. What screen is it? Woo! Lightning
Ernestine
fast.
is on
All
a roll.
right. Ernestine, it is not roster. Come on, one more. Right on.
Diana.
Woohoo. Okay. Reveal the answer, please. Yes, it is the CA168 Access HIA Plus Long-Term Care Member Income. So I just want to add a little mention here. In the current 2017 PMMIS tutorial guide, it still says CA167. So please make that correction on your printed copy of the tutorial guide. It is CA168. Thank you. Next slide. Yay! Thank you for participating, everybody. That was fun. We will have the two winners, and I really enjoyed creating this and having fun with some of these questions.
I think we already have 2 winners. Cheryl, we have Joni and Ernestine.
Awesome. Congratulations, ladies. We will be getting in contact with you. And all I want to say is, don't be like me. I still have my tutorial guide from 2012, and I had to reprint the revised 2017 one. So I would ask you guys to please tell your staff to print that tutorial guide, put it in your ALTCS Bible binder, and it is a good tool to continue to reference. You don't have to print it. It is on the website. Thank you, everybody. Have a great time.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was great.
Yes, thank you. That was fun. Okay, and next up, we're reviewing and updating all CA screens at each review, presented by Cheryl.
Hi guys, I promise it just happened that since I did the icebreaker, I would have to read. We're going to continue with PMMIS screens, reminders, tips, and so forth. Next slide. Okay, so this is a printout screen of the snapshot of what our policy 1620 ALTCS case manager standards. There's 14 standards, very important standards that ALTCS ensures that all tribal programs who have the IGA with access are in compliance with all these standards. I'm just going to go over a few, but this is a snapshot from the website. These PDFs are not hyperlinked, but they are in the website where you can print them and they're fillable. So next slide. Again, very, very important. What was happening a couple years back in 2019 was the CMS HCBS rule, which was related to person-centered service planning, PCSP. The goal of this initiative, HCBS rule, from all the way from the top, Medicaid services, Medicaid services, the federal dollars that trickle down to each state. And I just want to say there's no way around this, where it's an initiative that we have to follow with the federal government. The goal is that everyone, meaning every tribal member receiving HCBS services, do have informed choice about where they live, who they live with, what they do with their time, what they do with their resources, and who provides the services to support the choices that are made. So it is all member focused, member centered. They are the driver of their services, of their care. Next slide. So CMS rules on HCBS is the settings must be integrated in and support access to the greater community. That was back to number 1, where they live. They may live in a traditional home, or they may live within their communities. The settings must provide opportunities for the member to seek employment in competitive integrated settings, engage in community life, control personal resources. Now we know that these 3 areas are challenges for rural Indian country. For one thing, the majority of our population is over 65. Are they really going to be back in the workforce? Not necessarily, but they can also be doing stuff in their own home, on their own time. Some of them are weavers, some of them are beaters, all kinds of things, basket makers, pottery makers. So they are able to do that. Secondly, engaging in community life. Thank goodness that COVID is relaxing to the point where we are gathering again. Powwows are happening, song and dances are happening, traditional ceremonies are happening. So we want to ensure that members continue to be involved in their community life. Lastly, control personal resources. Now, we all know that this is really a challenge in Indian country because we have multi-generational homes that our members are living in. A lot of the generations after our ALTCS member, they rely on their income, their disability income, their retirement. And that's really a challenge because as tribal case managers, we have to be very, very careful on how we present the education around this right of the HCBS service planning topic. Everybody depends on that income, but what if the member has to go to skilled nursing? Well, that income has to follow the member to pay their share of costs, to share the costs with the state of Arizona for their skill care. So we need to continue to enhance our skills and knowledge around educating about ALTCS services and the HCBS services that they require and that they need. The third bullet is to ensure that the individual receives services in the community with the same access as individuals not receiving Medicaid HCBS services. So, an example, all of us here on this webinar, we can get up and go to our refrigerator, get what we want when we want to eat it, or what we want to eat, even though I'm eating a donut right now. Is that good for me? Maybe not, but that's my choice, that's my right. So HCBS person-centered planning is centered around what the member, even though a member is in a skilled nursing facility, even though a member is in an ALF, they should have the same right as we do as to requests for a treat, requests a donut. Can they have a donut? They may be diabetic. We can't say no to them. It's their right to have that donut. The most important education on that is in moderation. Are they going to have a dozen donuts every day? No. So we really have to critically think the HCBS service planning initiative. Every area we have to really use our critical thinking skills. We have to do motivational interviewing. We got to assess the environment, quickly to really see what's around. If you notice something, if you notice a roach running by, okay, you're not going to say, oh, there's a roach. No, you're going to say, okay, there's a roach in here. That might be something to follow up with. So again, observation, critical thinking to ensure that the members' rights stay intact. Next slide. So with the PCS planning reviews, the service plan is created using information gathered from the person-centered service planning process, which is the 29-page review. Secondly, good practice is to ensure that every completion of your person-centered planning review that you review all PMMIS screens. And I know I've done it before. I finish my review, I enter it on CA 161, populates to 165, then I start prior authorizing for the 3 months. Habit, not a good habit. The tip for that is to start in a good habit of looking at all the screens when you're doing that 90-day review or a 180-day review. Look at all your screens. That way, every screen is consistent with that face-to-face person-centered service planning review that you have just completed. And remember, we are not the goal is not to help people get better lives. The goal is not to have better, is just better plans, meaning the service plan, because it's person-centered. It's focused around the member, their rights and their needs, their medical needs. So I incorporated the illustration of the medicine wheel, and person-centered service planning is very, very important. And it incorporates dignified care, which would be quality of life, self-care, which would be person focused on the member, timely care to ensure that if they express a need to you, whether it DME, whether it medical supplies, whether I need to talk to a counselor, that it is met in a timely manner for that member. And individual care. Individual care is going to incorporate all of us, because if we are not individually caring for ourselves, we cannot be an effective case manager for that said member. So we're going to look at it holistically, like the medicine wheel. And the goal is for us to always deliver person-centered service planning to our members. Next slide. So again, the PMMIS system, make sure the service plan includes the beneficiary's name, address, date of birth, Medicaid identification number, and diagnosis. We all know that information can be found on from the CA 165 screen. You look at the bottom of the screen and there's options, F key options. You're going to F key 6 to CA 166. That's where you're going to find the authorized rep information. You're going to go to F7, and that's where you're going to find the demographics of the member. The address, mailing address, location of home. Remember, those are two different items. You're going to see their tribal affiliation. You're going to see their date of birth. All that's demographic information that you need. Include the beneficiary's needs, expectations, goals, and services in setting options that support community access. So you're going to go to the CA 165 again. That's where you're going to see their diagnosis. What are the expectations of the member? If they've had a stroke, is the goal going to be to try to build up that weak side? Is it physical therapy? Is it it might be increase in attendant care services? So all that is incorporated on the screens that we're going to be looking at. 165. You're going to be looking at the information on who are you going to refer. Do you need a referral out? Are you going to send a referral to the DCW agency to change to the previous units to increase for the time being? Or, all that, again, critical thinking. Secondly, if you go from the CA 166, you're on that screen, you F9, and that's where you can verify any Medicare services, any Medicare information. It'll give you the Medicare ID number. It will give you the parts that the eligible has, and it also will give you the tribe that they're, of course, it's going to be with your tribe. It'll be on there. Next slide. So PCSP also should ensure that the service plan is signed by all who are responsible for its implementation. Okay, I put this here because once the public health emergency, PHE, has ended, per Medicare services, every person-centered service planning must have the signature and the date that was completed. Prior to this, currently, when we were all in different kind of executive orders within our tribes, most of the person-centered service planning reviews were done telephonically. So once it ends, no more telephonic reviews. You will need to get signatures. The next one is provide the beneficiary with a copy of the service plan. Okay, we all know that wasn't happening. There was due diligence from all the tribes to try to get the person-centered service copies out, mailed out. You know, it was hit or miss whether you got them back or not, but that's understandable. We were in a public health emergency that interrupted a lot of different services. So once the public health emergency is over, the member has to get a copy of their service plan. Next slide. So monitor the beneficiary's progress toward meeting the service plan goals and remain in their own home or in the least restrictive environment. That is where you're going to be monitoring the CA 161. Remember, the CA 161 maintenance screen does drive every service that you are going to put in on the CA 165. So you have to monitor that. You have to look at it. You're going to say, okay, oh, the member, they're in the home, but now now they need hospice. Well, you can put you can continue the services at home, but you know what? It's not going to be accurate if you don't add that hospice placement code reason on the CA 161. So monitor, please monitor all screens. Also, if your member has become has increased behaviors, you're going to look at 161 and you're going to look at the behavioral health code. Is it appropriate for the member in an ALF? Are they there to stabilize them? Are they on psychotropic medication? Are they getting outpatient counseling? Critically thinking through monitoring each screen is so important. And then the next thing, and one of the top priorities with Arizona Long-Term Care Medicaid services, is cost effectiveness. We are the gatekeepers for these state and federal funds that come down to the tribal level. So we have to ensure that all the services are cost effective. And so you're going to go, if your member went from home to the nursing facility, you may change the placement, CA 161, and then add nursing per diem on the 165. But did you go to the 160 and update that? We're seeing a lot of those with our tracking, and they're not consistent. The screens are not consistent. Did you go to the CA 162, which nobody ever updates? It's just not a screen. We just forget about it. So again, monitor every screen. If your member's level of care changes, yes, you have to be cost effective, increase that level of care, gross institutional cost on your CA 160. You also have to go to 162 and update that level of care question there. So monitor, please monitor your screens after every person-centered service plan review. Next slide. And that is all. I hope you are going to dream about me saying monitor all your PMMIS screens tonight. It's a good best practice habit to get into for Tribal ALTCS case manager, and you will be always in compliance with your standards if you do that. Thank you, everybody. Do we have any questions? Comments?
You've got some thank yous and no questions, but you got people thanking you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much. Okay, and going on to the next here.
Looks like Diana has her hand raised.
Oh,
Charlie.
okay.
Go ahead, Diana.
I think that was from earlier
Oh, you might need to put
during the icebreaker, I think.
Okay.
All right. All right. Next up is Rachel. It is going to be over the EVV updates and MNDD dates.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We kind of wanted to do things a little bit different this morning and have everyone on my team take a certain role in this presentation to kind of help them also with not only overcome the fear of presenting, and some of us, it's our first times, presenting. So, we just kind of wanted everyone to take part and participate in presenting here of what our team is doing. We've covered a lot of things regarding the PMMIS, with the introductory. That's why the icebreaker was based on the system. You as leaders in those leadership roles are, those screens are a benefit to you, for you to know and to learn, to be able to provide that training to your direct reports, and making sure that you're being that support for them. And it's really good to have the knowledge of these screens in order for you to complete your quarterly audit reports, because we do get quite a bit of them that come in at 100%, which basically means that when we go out to audit, we are going to see that 100%. You are basically reviewing charts. You're making sure that your team is doing what they need to do. As you're reviewing your charts, you should be comparing it to the PMMIS system and making sure that that is aligning with their case reviews. So there's quite a bit of things that we bring to this presentation, but we really wanted to focus on the PMMIS system this time around, because that is like the main key, and it is a lot of work. There are case managers and supervisors who do carry a caseload, and it can be overwhelming. We can provide support from our side, but as it is outlined in the intergovernmental agreement, we really leave that up to the tribes to decide how they want to distribute these cases, assign these cases, and these caseload values. Those are really up to the tribe to make those decisions. So, but all in all, in a leadership level, knowing these screens and having that knowledge, even testing your team, even providing that testing to say, do you know what these screens are and what does it say? Or even having, pulling up those screens at your own level to see what cases are going to be reviewed, need to be reviewed within the next couple of weeks. And having that, you have all that information, but not very many of us are using that screen. I don't use it on a daily basis. I don't go to each of those screens on a daily basis, but you can also get creative in how you can use those screens to help you to identify things. So that's the reason why we really wanted to focus on PMMIS today. I think pretty much most of our presentation is about PMMIS, because when we go to audit, that's what we will run these reports based on what's in the PMMIS system. And then we'll be actually pulling those files when we get there and comparing it to were they entered correctly. So that basically means that you as a leader, when you're doing your audits, you're reviewing the screens with what has been assessed in the case, in the service plans, and also in the cases and the case notes all align, and with all the other documents that you have to complete, making sure that they align with the system. So that, that's why we really wanted to touch up on some of these things. So throughout the rest of the presentation, you'll probably, I know Sani and Bandana's presentation is based on the PMMIS screens too. And so just wanted to let you know that's why we're focusing on it. It's not because we feel that you don't know, it's just really good to get a refresher and to be familiar with those screens. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our presentation, which is like a really high priority right now with the EVV. We've implemented the the EVV. There has been periodic updates that have been made We have been providing education to most of the providers. They've done an outreach to us. We've had meetings with them, kind of similar to these quarterly meetings. We had like a bi-weekly meeting with the fee-for-service providers. We are now starting to see claims coming in. They are using the Sendata system. My team did an outreach a couple of weeks ago, actually for maybe about almost 2 months now. They've been doing outreach. Now it's at the level where we're working with these providers on some of the edit errors. They're starting to understand that this was an implementation, with the Social Security Act, and making sure that, that they, we're wanting and needing to know that these services are being provided in the member's home. There has been a lot of issues and concerns that have came up at the federal level, not just there, but even in the community, in the tribal community level. I remember in previous meetings, there was concerns about, our DCW workers not showing up, or maybe someone who lives in the home is, you're informed that they're not providing support. This will kind of help align and making sure that these members are receiving the services that was assessed to them. Go ahead, next slide. So as leaders, when you're auditing your cases, making sure when you look at these services that are listed here, making sure that they are authorizing those services in the system, making sure that the 90 days are actually put in the CA 165. We have seen over the past couple of months where case managers are not updating the service plan with these attendant care services. That's one of the main service that our members within our community gets. So we have noticed that there's no attendant care services. Who's providing care for this member? There's different projects that Access is working on to ensure that we are looking out for the best interest of the member, to ensure that we are coordinating these services. So as leaders, when you see any of these codes, when you're auditing and you're seeing some of these codes out there, make sure that they are authorizing for the quarter. You look at the review date, make sure they're authorizing to, when the review date is at the end of the month, up to that end of the month, making sure that they're updating the whole 90 days. I did hear that there were some providers that bill for the whole month. We did make contact with, I believe, like 2 of them so far, where I let them know, hey, you cannot bill for the whole month. You need to make sure that you're only billing for dates of services you render. So we're providing that education at our level 2. I know in the future, EVV is going to really help us to capture that, where we won't have to closely monitor it anymore. But if you go in the system and if you choose to authorize week by week, you have to make sure that whoever your case manager is authorizing the whole 90 days. If that's how you want your case managers to authorize, for a particular member. I know it doesn't happen with all members, but if you are giving that authorization to your case manager to authorize week by week, make sure that they authorize for the whole 90 days. And then you can monitor it to, I've heard that was just to help in not having to have so many open line requests submitted if maybe the member didn't receive services or member ended up in the hospital. Whatever your decision was, that's okay. But as long as the services are authorized for the whole 90 days of when they assess, they know that, for the next 90 days, this is the service that they will need. So just make sure that that's happening, because it's really affecting the reports on our end, and we have to do the outreach to the providers. So when you're auditing any of these services, please make sure that the services are updated for each member that you're reviewing when you're auditing. Next slide. So when we have first presented on this, we had explained to all the tribal long-term care programs that there was a default date, and the default date was the 1/1/80. And we are seeing that is still being used by some of the case managers. So I kind of wanted to give you guys and everyone here notification that this is happening. It's still happening with some of the members. This was just a default date at that period when we first started the EVV process. Next slide. So on the CA 165, when we talk about the MMDD, the medical needs determination date, when we're talking about that, we need to make sure that the date is formatted in this way. And that's happening. It is happening now. And making sure that you're, if they receive an error, case managers receiving an error, coming up in the system, making sure this might be the issue. They might not be using this format. So making sure that they are using that format. The dates cannot be greater than the effective date of the services. We always have to make sure, we have to remember, and the mindset across the board is that these are services that are being prior authorized based on the assessment. So if services, say if the review date, that's why we always say authorized to the end of that month that the review is due. So you have some time there to be able to prior authorize the next month, and making sure that you're always doing that, because when this date, the MMND date is, not aligned with what is being actually authorized, if they're actually after the actual dates of service, or I should say before the dates of services, it's okay. But if it's after, it's not gonna, the system is not going to speak to the Sendata system appropriately, and we're going to end up coming up with errors. So these days, always the MMNDD, we have been saying it's probably good to align it with the review date. So that, which means that you have to do your review prior to the next review date, prior to or by the end of the month. That way you have some time to prior authorize the next month. So making sure and keeping that alignment with across the board will really help our system, because we are getting a whole lot of errors coming in now. And when we go back to look at the service date, I'm looking at it with claims, it's hitting a lot of errors. And that's because we know that some of the services are not reviewed timely. But if you do the service authorization up to the end of the month, within that month that is due, it gives you that extra time to actually update for the next month. So that's what we were looking at, and those are some of the errors that we're coming across. And case managers should never edit a service line if a unit has been used. I know we've had some issues with the system where it was allowing some case managers to do that. I'm not sure if that has been fixed, but I do know that we did put in a request to have that removed, of case managers having that accessibility to editing the service line, because then it causes a recoupment to the provider, and then the provider is calling us. They're not calling the case manager or the tribal long-term care program. They're calling Access saying, hey, how come my payment was reversed? How come it was recouped? I want to know what happened. So in the event that your case manager is able to do this, you need to report it right away and let us know that this is happening. I know one of my team members have noticed this as they were doing some adjustment based on an open line request. The line wasn't even open, and the case manager was able to go in there and adjust the line. And she's like, it was just there a while ago. Now it's not there. So just be mindful and remind your case managers that they're not allowed to be editing those services. If they've already seen that their service has been used, they need to submit an open line request to fix that, because that's going to affect the EVV system also. Next slide. Okay, and I did mention that for the MNDD dates, making sure that they're defaulting to the review. Always when you're auditing, this is for supervisors, when you're auditing, and maybe get the case managers to get into that practice. Look at your review date, make sure that the next review date, whatever, because it auto-populates for us. When you put in the review date, it'll auto-populate. the next 90 days when the review needs to happen. They should be authorizing up to the end date, and then utilizing that review date as when you determined that the review has happened. In this particular case that we're looking at right now, it's prior to that date, but the date is showing 1/1/80, and that's not what it should be. It should be the 2/5/21. That's what, that's when the review was done according to this screen. So making sure that you see the next review date is due, I believe it's 5/6/21, and making sure that they authorize it up to 5/31/21. So that gives you that cushion of, authorizing for June after that. And that way providers are not calling us. We do get a lot of provider calls. They're telling us, hey, I wasn't there, I don't see an authorization in the system for this member, or we're getting claims and those claims are getting denied because there's no PA in the system. So it's when they do the review, they really need to be authorizing up to the end date of that next review date. That way the system will not hit an error on the SendData side, and it will not hit an error on our claim side. And that's where the reports are coming in at. Next slide. So this here is an example. It's just a snapshot of the report. And there is one provider who has over 600 claims that hit an edit error. 600, and that's just one provider. And it was all for dates of services 10/1. And I believe they bill, I'm not sure if they bill every 2 days, every 3 days, because it was like just every other day, it seems like they were submitting their requests. They have a right to do that. It's okay for them to do that. But if this is the weekly report that my team gets, the one in the gray side, that's the weekly report. And this is just a snapshot of just one provider. And this is not all of their claims that hit the edit error. It's telling us that it hit the no valid visit error. And for this particular member, the very first member, there was no valid visit error. It hit that error. And we were looking at the service plan. If you can see the two underlines there, the three underlines are all in red. For the very first member, it said the begin dates of service was 9/19/2022. And I said to our IT, because we're now in that testing phase, to my IT, I said, there is a service in there. There is a service for 9/1 to 9/30. It should be okay to pay that claim. We kept looking at it, and the claims finally said, no, Rachel, there is 0 units authorized. This is a real example of what we're seeing. Why is there 0 units authorized? This should never be like this, especially when you have a provider, this provider 431168, you're authorizing this provider to provide attendant care service to this member, but you're putting 0 units. That's why this member is showing up on the report. The very first member that you see, they bill for 40 units, but they can't get paid because there's 0 units authorized by the case manager. So that's why it's really important. There should never be 0 units when there's actually a provider providing services. If the assessment was done and there is services that need to be rendered to that member, then your case manager needs to be authorizing these services. And another concern that we had also was members that are wanting, as Cheryl had mentioned before, it's members' choice. These are all based on members' choice. So if a member had said, I don't want this agency no more today, I don't want it no more, I looked into another agency, I want to go with this agency, it's not up to the case manager to say, no, you can't have that. It's their right to choose who they want to get their services from, what agency they want to get their services from. They can flip-flop from one agency to another, and after a while, it could become a managed risk. And that's where you just let them know, hey, they might, if you keep doing this, they might not have a provider to provide services to you one day. So, we have to stay consistent. What's going on? What's the issue? How can I support you? How can I help you to make sure that you're with, a certain provider a longer period of time than basically just jumping around from one provider to another. But in any case, you should always make sure that your case managers are authorizing services. So this is when we will do those outreach. I know that there's been a couple of supervisors that have received calls from us is related to services. We do identify certain things like this, but this is not acceptable. What we're seeing on the PMMIS service screen is not acceptable because of the fact that some of these providers, they start wanting to refuse to actually provide services in tribal communities. And we don't want that to happen. I know there's an abundance of attendant care services in some area, but they do provide services in other tribal community areas. And we just want to make sure that we're not, getting in the position of, burning those bridges with these providers, because it's really hard to get really good providers out in our tribal communities. And the providers that are really culturally sensitive to our members and understand the cultures of our members. It is always members' choice, and case managers should always be authorizing for the full 90 days. So please make sure that that is appropriate when you're doing this, because we are in this EVV soft edit error phase right now. It is going to end on December 31st of 2022. The hard code edits are going to be actually implemented January 1st, which means my team is going to be backed up with phone calls from very upset providers if these authorizations are not being updated appropriately in CA 165. Then, as Cheryl has mentioned, time and time again, we are tasked to do this. Yes, we are tasked. We're all in this as a team. So please make sure that your PMMIS screens, when you're auditing as a leader, making sure that you're checking these, making sure that they're authorized all the way to the end, up to the end of the month of the next review date. That's really, really important to make sure you continue to do. Next slide. I think I have one more slide here. So with the case managers, like I said, just to kind of recap, they shouldn't be using the, the default date. They should always be using the review date if it's prior to the services that are rendered. If we kind of continue to do that, do what I had just explained, they should always be prior to the services being rendered because they are prior authorized services. And then if there's any other edit errors that they come across, making sure that they're looking at the errors. The cursor should be, highlighted in the area that there are errors and issues. So those are some other areas that you need to educate your case managers on. So these are just some of the edit errors that you'll come across. And basically it'll be reflecting and speaking to the MMNDD date. Next slide. I believe that's all I have. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there were any questions from any of you, but just give you a moment to, if you have any questions or any concerns related. I thought I seen something in the chat.
Rachel, there is a question. It says, should the MNDD date be prior to the month, not 8/1, 9/1, or 10/1? I think he means it should be the date of the review. Is that's what you were trying to say? Is that it should be the date of the review, correct?
Yes, because that's when they determine for the next 90 days, this is what the member needs. So it's best to use that date.
The exception would be if the review is beyond, if it's in the future and you're going back to make adjustments, then you would use the date of that service line. But
Rachel.
Primarily, it should be the review date.
Rachel.
Yes, Casey.
Casey, I was just referring to that example you had in your presentation.
Can we go back to that slide?
Yeah, please. That one, that I was just kind of looking at that, and then I was referring to this example. So, for example, August, the authorization that the MD date is 8/1/22, but shouldn't it be prior to?
Yeah,
Like
it's
7:30.
Yeah, it should have been. It shouldn't be
Okay.
like the way this is. So it should
Okay.
be, say, you can authorize it 8/1/22, but all of it after should be 8/1/22, because
Yeah.
that's when the need was identified that this provider needed. I mean, this member needed these services. Because you
Okay.
shouldn't be putting 8/1, 9/1, 10/1. It should be the whole 90-day review within that span. So it's best to use that review date on your on the last review date. Make sure you use it. It's better to use that, because then you can be consistent throughout the whole 90 days. And then the next 90 days, you'll have a different date because you reviewed it at a certain time. They were prior review. You prior authorized these services after you've done the review.
Also, Lorinda has raised her hand.
Yes, Lorinda.
You can unmute yourself. Or you can put your question in the chat.
Well, I do want to kind of give a shout out to Hopi, because they have done an outreach to the providers that they work with, and they have let them know, hey, you know, this is going into effect. If you're not in compliance with access, you will not be rendering services to our community. And they have really been working with the providers within the community. And all of a sudden I believe we had like 16, I think my team did an outreach to. And all of a sudden we got like over 68 providers that hit these edit errors. So that means the communication is happening. Now it's at our level, we're doing internal testing. And that internal testing is based on these two screens that you're seeing. They're not aligning with what the provider is submitting to us, and it's not aligned with the service plan. And that's why they're getting these errors. And if the hard code edit went into place, all of these providers would not have gotten paid. And it's for over 900 service lines that would not have been paid.
So I'm not sure what this is the first I've heard of this, but Lorinda said that now that we're using Rocket for PMMIS to access PMMIS, we don't see any error messages on the screen if data is not entered correctly. Lorinda, I'll have to check with our ISD department to find out. I know we also had another issue show up where there was some dates not showing. It turned out that there was something to do with the background color. And Casey, could you correct me if that is correct? Was that the resolution that we found out that there was something to do with the background?
Oh yes, just how the new Rocket application was implemented, we found that when you just a traditional view like the one at the example here with the black background, when we print it from our end, it would print the whole page black and just the way it is. So we were like, whoa, it's going to use up all our ink. So we went in and changed like the background to white, and then it gives you options of changing the different lettering. Like sometimes it says like protected text and different options, and you can change the colors on just the text that shows up in the screen. So the background, the black, we changed it to white, but apparently there's some preset, and when you're trying to change colors, that the cursor or the text is also white, so that's why it won't appear. Like the enrollment date and the disenrollment date wasn't appearing on ours, and the access technical support people showed me how to changed that color. So that was the issue. So I'm probably thinking that's probably the same thing.
Thank you, Casey. That's probably correct. I wanted to make sure that we brought you in because that was an issue and it did get resolved. Lorinda, you might try that. But if you need assistance, please let me know and I will reach out to ISD and see if they can work with you to get that fixed for you. Also, Niana has a question. She says, does that mean that all providers not signed up with the EBV system will be affected with not being paid?
Yes. Yes. We did get over 60 providers that actually were submitting their claims into the Sendata system. We're going to have to go back and match it up with the weekly reports that go out and see which providers were missing. But that's where we needed your assistance. The last time I had spoke about this was, please make sure you're reaching out to providers, letting them know, hey, EBV is going to go live soon. Right now, we're in the test. Access is in the testing phase with Sendata and providers. Please make sure that you are following all compliance measures and making sure that you are following up and clearing up any edits that you're receiving, and work with Sendata. And that's where Hopi kind of got in and started doing the outreach. And I believe St. Carlos also started doing that. They started doing the outreach with White Mountain. I do know they have only a couple of providers that provide the attendant care services, which wasn't a lot of work, but I do know St. Carlos also did the outreach too. So we're all in this together and having that outreach. We have provider education, providing education. We have my team who I feel so bad. They had to go through and do all of these outreach for at least about 2 months. And we're now down to the stage where it's internal. We're getting these reports, we're comparing it to the PMMIS system, and we're seeing these errors happening. So just being mindful that, we're educating our internal team and then providing that education to the providers. It will really help to smooth out this process a little bit better. So as what we're seeing right now, these edits are really hidden because our system, our case managers, or whoever's updating these service screens are not updating it timely, or either that they're updating it with something like this that you see on the screen, which is not acceptable. If you assessed a member for a certain amount of service and you assess that provider to provide that service, the case manager should not be authorizing 0 units, because that does interfere with the services that are being provided to the member. Is there any more questions?
Niana did say, okay, I'll send out a fax to the provider, not sign again. I'm not sure what you mean, Niana. You might clarify that. On the EVV system.
Oh,
Okay.
just making sure that they sign up for it. I think that's what she's.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
We'll
very much.
also provide, if we do see a provider that is on the list, which is the next thing that we're going to do. This is a lot of work. I mean, my team already has that. They have the weekly reports, they have a monitoring to do at the high level. We don't dig deep into any of these cases unless we see something like this. But they're also assigned special tasks that they're assigned to do. And that's part of making sure that we're all working together to make sure that we're providing that coordination of care with our members. But when we see stuff like this, it's like, this is not acceptable, because we're going to lose providers, and we're actually the ones receiving calls for this now. Access is receiving calls for what is being authorized in the system. So please make sure the case managers are not holding these services as hostage. Make sure that they're releasing these services, authorizing these services for the 90 days. So that way there is no issue with authorization. There is no issues with claims being submitted. there is no edit errors that these claims hit once they hit our system. So please make sure and educate the members. And as supervisors, when you're auditing a case, I can't tell you how to audit the case, but it'll probably be good after you're done doing the review and you set up all services. Please let me see the case file so I can do an audit. So you're going in and double checking to make sure that all of these screens that we're talking about today are actually being updated appropriately. So there is no services being delayed to our members, and making sure that, you know, you all are handling these at your level and resolving these issues at your level, because you do hold that IGA, and we want to be respectful and mindful that you are the one who coordinates these services. So thank you so much. I don't.
Rachel, there's one more question. How is the EVV system working with those members who have no cell coverage?
Okay, on the EVV webpage, you will see that there is they cannot do paper anymore. They have to have a key fob. In the event that there is a member who does not get a service area, they're not in a service area, they will be provided a key fob. And they have to punch in the number. They have to click this button. It'll give them a number, which will locate their location of their GPS, where they're at, where they're clocking in from. And then when they clock out, they will use the key fob again. They'll get another number. They will then put it on the paper format. Then once they get it on the paper format, they will then submit their timesheet, however, bi-weekly or weekly, however way they provide it back to their agency. They will then get it back to the agency. Their agency will go into the system, the send data system. They have to verify that service was rendered for that day based on the number that it was provided, because that number will track the GPS location of that worker. It will also capture the date. It will also capture the time of when they clocked in and clocked out. So they do have that key fob option.
I think that was all the questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. So this is time to come back at 10:30. Please be prompt. But go get your coffee, go use the restroom, whatever you need to do, make your calls, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, it's 10:30. Is everyone back?
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started then. I'm going to go over the CES overcost process and packet. The reason why we're going over this again, we went over this at a previous quarterly meeting, is because of the fact that we have been discovering that the CES packets are not being submitted for ALF placements. So when the packet is submitted for an ALF behavioral health for a specialty rate, that does not approve the CES over cost. And we're going to go over that a little bit later, but at the near the end of this presentation. But I wanted to let you know that that is not going to, that does not approve the CES. So we're going to go over this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And some of you are newer since last time we went over this. So we'll go ahead and go over this. Some of this is already you already know, but these are the links to the policy and also to the PMMIS manual. So these, again, this will be going out as a recording, will also be uploaded to the digital toolbox. So it'll be stuff that you can go through and go, to review with your case managers in your office and help them understand it and be in line with this. So next slide. And this is just a snapshot from the actual PMMIS manual, and talking about how to submit a new CES. And I'm not going to go into great detail in this, but you can go in and see this is that the ones with the X's, the red X there is basically saying don't do that. The ones in green are the ones to use, but so again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but it is self-explanatory and walks you through. Well, I shouldn't say self-explanatory, but it does show you step by step of how to go in and put in a new CES, not overwrite an existing one, but put in a brand new one. Okay, next. And again, this is more of the PMMIS manual, and goes on and talks a little more. So I just wanted to provide that for you. Go ahead and go next. And the critical CES dates that must be entered into PMMIS on CA 160. And in Cheryl's presentation, she did talk about all the screens. This is one of them that needs to be reviewed. So the date of the current PCSP review should be the same date of, well, quite often is the same date of the review of the CES, not always. Sometimes the review, the CES date might be 10/1, and I think all of you know what 10/1 usually is that is when new rates start. And I shouldn't say start, but when new rates are rolled out. And again, new rates are rolled out on 1/1, and this happens every year. Occasionally it happens 7/1. That hasn't been the case for a couple of years now, so that's just occasionally. The new gross institutional cost corresponding with the rate change must be used. So whatever the new rate is, and you can find those out on the digital toolbox. The new HCBS unit cost corresponding with the rate change must be used. So if it's attendant care services, that's 5125, that must be the rate that is used. Next screen. And if the new CA 160 percentage reflects anywhere between 81 to 99, then of course, as you know, a new CES overcost packet must be submitted to Access for approval. If there is no prior approved CES overcost letter in the case file, so if you have one, it is good for 12 months from the date of the actual approval letter, provided that nothing changes as far as the percentage. So then if it has expired, the previous letter, so if it's more than 12 months and the rate hasn't changed, you still need a new CES overcost packet because the previous one is only good for a year. The current approved greater than 80% CES overcosts, again, is must be submitted to Access for approval. And the only exception would be if it went less than 80%, then we wouldn't need a new packet for that. Next screen. And that's basically what I'm saying right there, is that if it has gone down, then that's not going to affect it. So next screen. All right, this is policy 1621, which talks about the actual the case management timeframes. And so if you see down there 1620-1, go to the next screen. And here it talks about the case file updates, the initial cost effectiveness study, and it must be prior to the placement services. Initial CES, when services are in place at times of enrollment within 12 business days of enrollment, and the CES update prior to placement change to HCBS, and annually for all HCBS members, and when there is a change in the member's condition, which would possibly change the percentage. Next screen. And this is the policy 1620C. And again, this will be going out in to the digital toolbox. And these links, you can click on them and go straight to it. It will take you to that policy for the cost of effectiveness study standards. Next screen. And this is the actual policy. Is talking about the time frames of completion of the CES, can be found in AMPM chapter 1600 and exhibit 1620-1, which we went over previously. The annual reassessment and adjustment of the institutional rates based upon changes in cost associated with the assessed levels of care and specialized needs. I'm not going to go into great detail on this because you can read this yourself. But this is what the CES can be completed or shall be completed for members with developmental disabilities under the following circumstances. If the member is, again, if the percentage doesn't change, then that letter is good for 12 months. Next screen. Again, more policy. And I'll let you go into that. I would highly encourage you to go over this with your team. In a team meeting is going over, making sure that they're familiar with the policy. If they are, that's great. But if not, here it is. Next screen. And again, more policy and talking about the things that that must be included. So I won't go into great detail on this either, but you can read it. Next screen. And this is something, again, those of you that have been here before have seen this, but those of you who haven't, I pulled up examples, and if anyone can actually shout out or write in the comments, is tell us if a CES should have been submitted to Access for approval and why. Okay. Anyone? Yes, it's over 80%. Absolutely, that's correct. Okay, next screen. And in this case, unfortunately, there was not an overcost packet received for this member. So this is really important that the overcost packet be submitted. And yes, the unit cost should reflect the HNT. Yes, that's correct. And on this one, can anyone tell me what's wrong with this one? If you're looking at it, if you can catch it or see it. Okay, go ahead and go next, Charlie. So if you look at the date that was on the HCBS on this, it should have been 562. So the unit cost was incorrect. And if recalculated, which we did, we recalculated that, and at 562, it would have been 82%, but at 524, it was 76. So when we actually went in and recalculated it, we determined this should have been a CES packet. Next. Thank you. And here's another one. Can you tell us what's wrong with this one? Look at the CES date and kind of look. Okay. Well, go ahead and go next, Charlie. So if you look at the CES date, the unit cost, the HCBS unit cost was $562. This one reflects $4.53, which is obviously incorrect. And again, this showed up at 47%. But when we recalculated, it did not go over the 50 or the 80%. However, this was actually, this would have been a ding if it had been an audit. So good thing to watch for is make sure that when you're doing your audits is monitor all those screens, as Cheryl says, making sure that you're looking to see that those rates are in there correctly, because you know, it's not really, we don't get a lot of joy out of dinging people. We really want to see you guys succeed. So that's what the purpose of these meetings are. Next screen. And can anyone tell us what's wrong with this one? It's showing 84% as of 10/1/2021. Go ahead and go next screen. And so based on this member should have had an CES overcost packet, but nothing was received. As you can see, the rate was wrong. It is not 524. It should have been 562. And the actual percentage when recalculated was moved to 91%. Again, this is something that is really important. If you're reviewing all of your screens and you're looking to make sure that your rates are in there correctly, then this will not be something that is missed. And again, it's not something we are just, you know, looking forward to. We really want to come out and see you guys succeed when we come out to do our audits. So if you can look at these, everything that we've gone over today and apply it, you guys will actually do really well. So next screen. Thank you. As it's filtering through with the changes that adjusted, and again, nothing was received for this one, so that's another big thing. Next. Okay, here's another one. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this one? Again, the date was 10/14. The CES date was 10/14/2021. It shows a rate of 571 and 69%. Go ahead and go next. Okay, so the HCBS unit cost as of 10/14/2021 was not 571. It was 562. The actual rate to 571 did not change until 1/1 of 2022. Therefore, this HCBS was incorrect. And the gross institutional rate is incorrect as well. Next screen, or next. So these are the things that we found that were incorrect. Next. And when we went in and made the changes, it still did not go over the 80%. It went up to 68%. It went down slightly, but again, this, you know, if this had been an audit year, this would have been a ding. So our whole purpose of these meetings is just to help you get in line and be online with policy, making sure that you guys are succeeding. Next. And then as of 1/1, of course, that rate went up. Okay, is there any questions on that? Okay, go ahead and go next. Okay, I am going to go over the weekly reports and the dummy access PID 029108 reports. And we have a method to our madness here. Go ahead and go next. So the coordinators have been sending out the weekly reports on the, you know, the weekly projected overdue and then the weekly no service line reports. And they actually have put a due date on there, and the coordinators have indicated that they have not been receiving these reports back from the tribal programs with the comments typewritten on the reports by the deadline noted on the emails and the reports. So that is a problem. We really need everyone to respond back with the dates reflected on those. Again, the due date for the return of the weekly projected overdue and the weekly no service line reports is due by Wednesday of the same week. And I know it's a short-term turnaround time, but you got to remember that the reports run Friday morning at 8 a.m. It might be earlier than it might be, but it's Friday morning that they run, maybe 5 a.m. And so if the corrections are not made by, yeah, thank you, Cheryl, 5 a.m. So if the corrections are not made by Thursday at close of business, that member is going to show up on that weekly projected overdue or weekly no service lines again the following week. And any corrections that are not made and a member that shows up for 2 consecutive weeks or more, the coordinators are going to make outreach to the supervisors, and we need to know why the corrections are not being made, why the reviews are not being completed. We really do appreciate all your hard work, and I know we are kind of coming down on this. These things are really important because these are members' lives. This is not just numbers, and these are actual members' lives. They need to have services. They've been determined to be eligible and that it's required. So we really need to be very diligent in making sure that we get these things done timely to make sure that the members can continue to receive their services. And next screen. So as you know, previously we were submitting, all the coordinators were providing comments on the weekly projected overdue report for any use of the dummy PID 029108 on that report, but that was delaying things greatly. It was delaying getting that report out because that's very time consuming for the coordinators. So we're going to have them get those out, those weekly reports, the projected overdue and the no service lines out to you earlier in the day on Mondays. And then we are going to put together a separate report starting Monday, October 31st. The coordinators will be sending out a separate report either Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning at the latest. It'll be just strictly for the dummy PID 029108. And again, this will get those other reports out to you more quickly. And then they can concentrate specifically on this. And the dummy code reports, again, we use that dummy code just because that's the one that is for non-paid, non-access paid services. But some of them are very important, such as informal support. The reports will look very similar to the projected overdue report, but they will be specifically dedicated to that dummy PID usage. Next screen. Okay, and they are going to be making their notations of what corrections need to be made on the actual report. And Bandana will be going over in her presentation next over the correct and incorrect usage. We've been talking about this now for probably a couple of months. So this is not something new that we've been, that we're just coming up with. It's just trying to reiterate to you what the correct usage is and the incorrect usage. But please note that the dummy code should not be utilized for a SNF or an ALF as a placeholder. Those members should actually be showing up on the no service line reports, and comments should be placed in PMMIS stating that you have submitted a request for approval. And then we can determine if it's something, that is lacking on the side of access, or, and just make sure that we get those out to you as quickly as possible. Those reports will be going out again Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, and they will need to be emailed back to the assigned coordinator by or before 5 p.m. on Thursdays with the tribal comments typewritten on the report and corrections made to PMMIS. Again, any members that are not made by 5 p.m. will show up on the following week's report. And any members that show up on that report for 2 or more consecutive weeks, the coordinators will be making outreach to the tribal program manager or the supervisor to find out why the corrections have not been made. Next screen. So that's it from my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you don't hear, you can always email me. But if you have any questions, we can certainly address them now. Okay. Go ahead, Charlie, and go next.
Hello, everyone. Today I'll be going over Dummy Access PID 029108. Email was sent out by Access Tribal ALTCS Management regarding correct and incorrect usage of Dummy Access PID 029108. Next slide, please. The correct usage of Dummy Access PID 029108 is 823 hospitalization of member. Informal support S5125 must also include the U modifier. U3 spouse of the member, U4 family member who's not living in the home with the member, and U5 family that is living in the home with the member that is not the spouse. Please let the case managers know to enter comment in PMMIS stating that IFS is providing the attendant care services for the member. New comments need to be entered at each review period. Placing comments in PMMRS is extremely helpful because it lets us know what is going on with the member. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of 823 and S5125 correct usage of Access Dummy PID code. As you can see on the bottom of the page, circled in yellow, the left side of the page shows the code 823 used correctly. And on the right side of the page shows the code S5125 used correctly. Next slide, please. Incorrect usage of Dummy Access PID 029108. Please do not use for placeholder for SNF specialty rate that is 0194. Do not use for placeholder for all behavioral health rate that is T2031 and T2033 behavioral health. Do not use for emergency alert system, do not use for NEMT, and do not use for any service code for DME medical service not paid by Access. Also, when case manager submits SNF specialty rate or all behavioral health rate request to Access, they should be inputting a comment on PMMIS at each review. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of T2033 and 0194 incorrect use of Dummy Access PID code. As you can see on this page circled in red, on the left side of the page shows the code T2033 used incorrectly. And on the right side of the page shows the code 0194 used incorrectly. Next slide, please. Here is another example of incorrect usage of S0215, A0120, and 0651 Access PID dummy code. As you can see circled in red, this code should not have been used. Next slide, please. Either enter the paid access PID or enter the services on page 17 of the PCSP under non-ALTCS funder services along with who's the payer source and frequency. Here is an example. Emergency alert system, NEMT, DME, and hospic are non-ALTCS funder services, and it should not be entered on CA165 screen. Next slide, please. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Bandana. Cheryl, you raised a hand.
Yes, I just wanted to put in there for those that I put it in a chat, but for those that aren't seeing the chat, is that the A23 hospitalization report that sometimes you receive are generated from Access when a member has been admitted to an urban hospital. specialty hospital or transferred out from either Tribal 638 or an IHS. So it is really important and also proactive to continue to educate the DCW agencies that have been allowed to render services on your reservation or your nation, to reiterate to them that as the DCW agency, as the employer of their caregivers, they are also responsible for communicating that information to the assigned case manager. If a caregiver goes that is not a family member, goes into the home and the member's not there, and the family says, well, we had to take her to the ED emergency department last night in Tuba City and she was flown out to Flagstaff or Phoenix, then it is the direct care agency responsibility to let the case manager know. That doesn't always happen, but it can become a best practice if we as a program continue to educate, reiterate, and also explain to them why we need this information, especially, again, goes back to Rachel's presentation of EVV taking effect. Thank you.
Okay, so couple of comments in the chat is 0651, when paid under Medicare, it should go on the CA 165 with the dummy code, correct? And no, that is what we're saying. If it is paid by Medicare, then it should not show up on the CA 165 screen. That should go on the PCSP page 17. We want to make sure that you guys are noting those non-ALTCS services, because you guys are providing those or helping provide that, but it is not paid by access. If it is paid by access, then yes, it should be entered with the paid PID on there. If it is the emergency alert system and it is not paid by access, if it is paid by access, then yes, definitely input it on the CA 165, same way with 0651, which is hospice. Those should be put on CA 165 if they are paid by access. If they are not, then they should not be placed on CA 165. You should have comments on CA 165 saying that 0651 is being provided, but it should go on the PCSP page 17. Does that answer your guys' questions? Okay, thank you. Yes, that's correct. So it's actually saving you guys a little bit of time of inputting those. If they are, yes, A00, which is Medicare, that's when a member is in a SNF being paid by Medicare, then no, you won't use the dummy code. I don't even think PMMIS will allow you to. It makes you put in the paid PID in there. Okay, so veterans receiving services through VA and they get placed with VA community living centers receiving services, and the CA 165 and date ends with 8/23. And the notes indicate the member's location. What do you want showing on CA 165 when the A23 and date appears as if the member isn't placed anywhere? Okay, so if the member is in a facility that is not, you're saying paid by the VA, is it an access registered provider? Then you can actually be putting in the A00 with that paid PID. Oh, their ID is terminated. That's something we may have to kind of think about. I'm assuming this is Joni. Why don't we talk about this offline about that? Because that seems to be a pretty rare instance, but we can talk about that offline. Cheryl?
Yes, so always remember, keep in mind that AHCCCS ALTCS is the payer of last resort. So if the member is a veteran who has Medicare, then they are going to be the payers of the services. So if you're going to put it in as a living center, which would be a T2033, then you could put that in as a with the 0 unit cost and the dummy code, but you will have to put that note in the comment screen. Does that clarify that part?
Okay, do we have no more questions?
I'm
Can
sorry, I
you,
didn't raise my hand.
Carol, could you explain that again one more time? I just want to make sure, because we've had a lot of discussion internally utilizing that dummy code.
Mhm.
And then also the findings in the PMMIS manual, and just making sure that we're all aligning, because I don't want the tribal case managers or supervisors to go back to the manual, especially if we're telling them to upload it, save the updated one. I do know that you had mentioned about utilizing the dummy code, even though they were not, even if it was not services provided, paid by AHCCCS, they would utilize that code, correct? That's what it says in PMMIS manual, correct?
Correct.
But it
So
would.
the point on on Joan or Unknown's question is this Joni? If it's my point on this question is that AHCCCS is the payer of last resort. So if the member's Medicare for medical necessity will cover the stay at the assisted living center. Then if there's anything that needs to be paid after that for any reason, VA will kick in. Then anything else after that, that living center, after their billing, they would say, hey, we're still not getting paid the full amount for this member's level of care. We need to contact Medicaid now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna, you're gonna put the living center, if that's the code T2033, you want to put that in there because we need to know the member's placement, right? So you're going to put that in there, and you're going to put it with the data services. And it's my understanding you're going to put the dummy, you would use the dummy code because it is if there's a possibility that AHCCCS might need to chip in for that member's residency in this living center, then it's on there, you can update it. If the living center has an ID, then you could put that in there. Then that'll wipe out even using the dummy code. But you're gonna, and then secondly, my second point is that AHCCCS is payer last resort is the first. Second point is please put it in your documentation on the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Casey did ask, and I answered it in the chat, but he did ask if the 0194, the SNF special rates have not yet been approved and waiting on the rate approval. So we just leave the CA 165 blank for now. And that is correct, Casey. Yes, those members should actually be showing up on the no service line report. And we know the reason why. We would be able to look at the comments and CA 165, see that you guys have submitted the specialty rate requests And we would know that this is not something that is on you guys for, we're waiting on rates or you're waiting on access for whatever reason, that we can justify that. That's we can say, okay, we know why. And then that gives the coordinator time to also go back and search and see if the approval had been submitted and maybe it just didn't get through to the case manager, whatever the case may be. What we can research on our side to find out if that approval was submitted.
So just to kind of touch up on that too, regarding Casey's question, we just, as we always say, that we hold you all accountable for, what your case managers do on your end of coordinating care. We are just as accountable on the access side when it comes to ensuring that you have the appropriate rates, that ensuring that we have our system is working appropriately, so that way that the services can be coordinated with your providers that you're working with for these members. So as accountability on our end, those specialty rates should be updated. We should be providing that to you. As we're always saying, prior authorization, we're saying this to you. We need to ensure that these rates are in place. The only way, but we, within our unit, we are not in control of those specialty rates at all. We don't have no control. We have to wait for the rates team to review and to come up with an average rate that they will provide for fee for service. So what I'm trying to do is, the numbers don't show appropriately when they are reporting, and numbers don't show correctly when case managers are utilizing the dummy code. It makes it seem like, yes, there is services, so they're not showing up on the report. But if we see the report and the numbers rise within the month of October, November, and December, and sometimes we all know that they don't even release the rates to us until the end of December, and by that time the provider's already billing, and now we're running into open line requests adjustments. Our number starts growing on the requests that are, the claims that are coming in, and then also they're still billing regardless. They see a PA in there, they're going to bill. If there's no units in there, there's no ability to bill. And it also, providers are going to be upset. Yes, we have to communicate with them and let them know we're waiting on the rates team. But the purpose of all of this is to let the rates team know, hey guys, this is our numbers. This is what happens every year. And we need to come up with a streamlined process, because it's really affecting the care, because providers are going to start, especially Winslow Campus of Care. They will come back and say, why isn't Access doing this? It's really not your fault. It's not our fault. But it's really the rates team are trying their best to get all of these rates updated and making sure. And I did express that already. I said, usually typically around this time of the year, our numbers start increasing. When they said, what is your numbers then? I couldn't provide them anything because everyone was putting in the dummy code or 0 units. And so there was no data to provide to them. And that's the reason why it's best just to leave it blank, let them show up so that I can provide it to the rates team, the actual numbers that we're waiting for specialty rates.
Thank you, Rachel.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. So I just wanted to go back to Casey's question regarding the medical alert system. I pulled up that Medicare, traditional Medicare, which is what most of our members have, Medicare does not cover the emergency alert system. Now, if the member opts in to pay for supplemental, which is more Medicare coverage, Medicare Advantage plan, then maybe under Medicare B, though that DME, the emergency alert system may be a covered service, but traditional Medicare does not pay for the alert system. I want to give kudos to a couple of tribes, Tohono O'odham, Gila River Indian Community, Pasquayaki that I know of, and San Carlos Apache. Those tribes, Pasquayaki, Gila River, and
You said San Carlos and Tio.
yes, and Tio. Those tribes, they are being paid. The tribe is paying for the emergency alert system for their tribal members. TO is getting really close to getting. They're looking into it. San Carlos Apache, which is really great. Their tribe is they have a provider ID to pay for that service. So I would encourage other tribes, maybe that's something to look into, because it could be reimbursed if the tribe becomes a member, a provider to pay for that. So yes, that I just wanted to say that traditional Medicare does not pay for the alert system. Thank you.
And based on what Cheryl just said, those services that are paid by the actual tribe, they should be not showing up on CA 165. They should be showing up on the PCSP page 17 as non-ALTCS paid services. And Joni, you said that when DME is covered by Medicare, that part should be on the PCSP page 17, not on CA 165. It's not paid by Access. The part that is paid by Access, that 20%, yes, you can PA that part, but not the part of Medicare. That should go on that PCSP page 17. Okay, hopefully that clears that up. Any other questions? Thank you. Very good questions. You guys had some great questions, and we do appreciate it very much. We appreciate everything that you guys do, and we're here for you. And as it says here, we do appreciate your hard work and dedication, especially to all of our members, that your members, our members, you guys do a great job on that. So we need to probably move on. And I think, yeah, it's Vanessa's turn. Thank you. Cheryl, did you have one more thing you need to add before we move on?
Yes, I just have one more. Nayana's question was, what about the Medicare code A00? Would that be a dummy code?
No, I think we talked about that a little. Well, maybe I talked about it on just but no, that should be the paid PID, because it won't let you enter that as the dummy code. The A00, it'll make you put in the actual paid PID.
Yes, and PMIS, as Sonny said, will allow it with the provider ID. Now, to piggyback a little more on that, all members have Medicare ACE stay for nursing home. They have a number of days, so you would need to communicate with the business office and say, hey, you know, I see that my member's admitted to your skilled nursing facility. How many Medicare days does the member have? So they could say 99, they could say 15. So whatever the number they give you, then you're going to only put in that A00 for the number of Medicare ACE stays that are remaining for that member. You're going to PA that for that many days, because after those Medicare days run out, then and they're still in the facility, then ALTCS will need to be put in for that cost. Thank you.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, go ahead and take it away, Vanessa.
Okay, so I will be going over PA requests, documents required for PA extensions, Next slide. For skilled nursing facility special requests, the provider will need to submit the request to the case manager for specialty rates. That could be vents, trachs, inpatient dialysis, respiratory. The provider will need to submit medical documentation to support that specialty rate they're requesting. For levels 0191 to 0193, you can look that up off of the exhibit of 1623. It does give an outline of what level the member could be. And those services can be added directly to the CA 165. Next screen. For documentation, what I'm looking for is clinical documentation supporting the specialty request, supporting diagnoses. An example would be, I received a bariatric patient request. Was the member requiring additional assistance by staff due to the weight? Are they using bariatric equipment to provide the cares? For bariatric classification, that could be when the BMI is equal or greater to or greater than 30. For in-house dialysis, I'm looking for clinical notes. This could be from their nephrologist or the dialysis notes. Sometimes the nurses they do make pre and post dialysis notes. So that's what I'm looking for with dialysis. Next slide. For assisted living facilities, for the assisted living facilities, their behavioral health, traumatic brain injury rate, memory care, wandering dementia, we do look for updated documentation. The initial request will need clinical documentation. That could be from the psychologist or any clinical provider who's providing that clinical diagnosis. We do need the Exhibit 16-2015. That's the Assisted Living Facility Residency Agreement. Next slide. For the initial requests, we do need the clinical documentation or supporting diagnosis. For the concurrent reviews, I'm looking for any ELF behavioral health or supporting documentation from the clinical provider within the last 30 days. Next slide. For DME, medical equipment, when the cost exceeds $500, would require a PA. Medical supplies for wound care treatments, when the total exceeds $500. This is specified in 1620F for PA requirements per AMPM policy 310P and AMP policy 820 will list the PA requirements. Medically necessary incontinence supplies, diapers, chucks. This includes any personal care items intended to treat the incontinence condition. Those are also listed in 820, 310P, and 430 for PA requirements and criteria for coverage. Next slide. Required documentation for DME. We do need the ICD-10 code for the incontinence supplies or DME item, face-to-face and clinical notes, assigned script dated by the MD, DO, DMP, NP, or PA per AMP policy 310P. For signature requirements, that is described in AMPM 940, and they are applicable to CMS rules. So, I'm looking for a signature with the NPI number or an electronic signature. We can't accept like rubber stamps or signatures where their credentials aren't like correctly labeled. For the DME provider quote, we do need HCPCS codes or CPT codes for the items requested with the corresponding number of units per month and the buy report prices of these items. Next slide. For wound supplies, We will need the face-to-face clinical notes with updated wound measurements and amount of exudates and medical necessity of these wound care supplies. I did include a reference from CMS for Medicare coverage. So it does go a little bit more in depth as to what we're looking for with wound supplies. For the orthotics, for members 21 years of age or older, we do need the statements below. The use of orthotics is medically necessary as the preferred treatment option consistent with Medicare guidelines. The orthotic is less expensive than other treatment options or surgical procedures to treat the same diagnosed condition. And the orthotic is ordered by a physician or PCP. For usually the vendors have a form that have all of these statements already on them. So I'll usually ask them for it and they send it right over, but they do have a specific form that has all of those statements. And then for DME shoes for the members, we do require a letter certifying that the member has diabetes and that they have the supporting diagnosis. Next slide. For acute care services for our tribal ALTCS members, I did receive a couple of these recently. For PA requests for acute care services, those do get faxed over to DFSM. I did include the fax number for the DFSM fax line. The CMs will not get a response from DFSM. The providers will get that response on their web portal. So I would encourage the providers to check their web portals to see what their PA response is. If the provider gets directed to you, please educate the providers to submit for acute care services to DFSM. If the providers are stating, they're being informed to go to the case manager, if you could get a name from like who's directing them to you, then that could kind of help us trying to find where it's coming from so that way we can get it corrected. Next slide. So here is my contact information, my phone number, the fax, my email. I am still training our new tribal ALTCS nurse, so any questions can continue to come to me. Any requests that you need any additional assistance on can continue to come to me until at least our training is completed. So I do want to introduce her to everybody though. So the next slide, we will be introducing our new addition, and I am happy to introduce her. Her name is Maria Dorado. I'm going to give her a couple minutes to just introduce herself to everyone. Maria?
Hi. I'm Maria Dorado. I've worked in wound care since, not wound care, sorry. I've been a nurse since 2004, and I was a CNA 13 years before that. My main forte was wound care, so I am wound care certified. I'm happy to be here. Really excited. Absorbing everything that you guys are saying, and I hope I do right by all your teachings.
Thank you, Maria. We're glad you're here with us. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Maria and Vanessa. We have some welcome aboards, and welcome Maria from Lakeisha and from Ernestine. I'm sure everyone is feeling the same way. We're very happy to have Maria with us. Okay, next slide. Casey, okay, Casey, Vanessa, let's go back really quick. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, but DME extension is having what?
Somebody.
I think it's pandemic related.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Pre-pandemic?
This is Casey. I was just I noticed that a lot of DME providers are they were given the authorization. Like we have a couple that were authorized in July to provide an item, but just because everything is like backlogged, back ordered, they're asking for extensions, and those extensions we can enter on our end, right? The dates.
No, there's actually a like correction form that would need to be submitted if they're requesting those specific days that they're planning on rendering services to. I have seen them quite a bit with like the wheelchairs where they're having like product issues or delivery issues, and some of them are pandemic related, but they'll what I've seen is they just submit the PA correction form with the dates of service they're wanting corrected. So that way I can revoke out the previous month so we can kind of move them down the line as to what months they're planning on actually delivering the equipment.
Good
Okay.
question. Thank you,
Could we
Casey.
get that form emailed in, or would it be us providing it to the DME provider?
The correction form?
Yeah.
The fax correction form is on the Access website, but we'll be happy to send you a link to it.
Okay.
Okay.
But Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the provider's responsibility to submit that, correct?
Yes, so I accept it either way, whether it's from the provider or whether it's from the case manager, because
Okay.
our auth has already been issued. It's just the dates of service that they're requesting.
Okay.
Correction too. Okay. Thank you. Okay. If there's no other questions, we're going to move on. So the last thing that we have to talk about is this is a new form. It's the alternative setting, which is basically an ALF, specialty rate, prior authorization request, and CES over cost. And I alluded to this earlier in my going over the CES. So next slide. So this is the new form, and it is going out on the digital toolbox, the Tribal ALTCS digital toolbox, and all about forms. It is not out there yet, but it should be out there today. So I will be including that link in this PowerPoint slideshow. And so it will be on there once it goes live onto the Access website. But we created this a combined online form for HCBS setting, again, ALF, specialty rates. It includes both prior authorization and CES over cost. And the link, again, will be provided. So it's not out there yet, but I just contacted our ISD department to ask when it will be uploaded, and it should be up there today. Next slide. And as you know, all ALF behavioral health requests require approval from the Tribal ALTCS nurse. In addition, if the CES on the CA 160 is greater than 80%, but less than 100%, then it also requires the approval of the Tribal ALTCS case management coordinators. And again, those CES approval letters are good for a year, provided that that percentage does not increase. If the CES is 100% or higher, then it requires the approval of the Tribal ALTCS nurse. And those approvals are good for 6 months. And here's a snapshot of what the one on the left side it looks like on that form. If you go back really quick, just go back to screen, Charlie. Right there is the actual snapshot of the full form, and we're talking about, if you can kind of move your cursor over the side that we're talking about on here, is that one that says new review for the Tribal ALTCS side. That's the one that we're looking at. So next slide. Okay, so this is that part on the left side that we were talking about is the nurse review. This one will not affect the current CES. And so we want to make sure that you, when you use this, you would check that box that says nurse review, put the date in there, and this will be fillable. And you can check the clinical documentation. It'll also be including the service or treatment plan within the past 30 days, the behavioral health, memory care, whatever the option that applies to your particular member and situation. TBI, wandering dementia, blended rate, and I think Vanessa talked about that earlier, just a little bit ago in her presentation, along with any supporting documentation, the provider name and the provider ID, access ID, and a new face sheet with a new date spends. So this is really important that don't utilize a previous face sheet with a previous date span, as it will be marked as a duplicate and will be closed, and your approval, this will not be approved. So just be, and if you already have a CES letter that is within the timeframes noted in number 2 or 3, such as 80% or 100%, then you could select just this option. And that would be just be going to the Tribal ALTCS nurse for review only. Next slide. Okay, so if you need both an ALF behavioral health specialty rate from the nurse, as well as a CES approval letter from the coordinator, then you would select the option on the right of that form that says nurse and coordinator review. And basically this is saying that the new rate will affect the CES, the current CES, and then you'd put your date in there and all of the forms that are required for the nurse, as well as these down below that we've noted in here, is those will also be required, and this will just be one packet. So rather than you having to send in a packet for the ALF behavioral health rate and a packet for the CES, we're trying to save you some time and money. Not money, but time, is including that in just one packet. And then on our side, we will take it and split it out so that it goes to the nurse and it goes to the coordinator. Does that make sense? So yes, you are still going to use the checklist for the CES overcost, and it does say it on there. If you see on here, it says CES overcost checklist. So this is just the actual a request. This is not the actual checklist. This is just a request, and we are going to be updating that CES checklist, overcost checklist as well at some point, and it'll be going out on the digital toolbox as well.
So Sonny, does the checklist have the same information that's circled at the bottom on it?
Yes. Yes. So it does, but it has a little more. It has a little more information on there. But we're just making sure that you know that this is what is required if you're going to just submit one packet for the behavioral health rate and for the coordinator to review the CES overcost.
Yeah, and the only reason why we had to come up with another format is because we're not getting a lot of CESs.
Right.
And
that's right.
Yeah, we're not getting, we went and looked at some reporting, and we're missing quite a bit of them. So, and then we also, there was that confusion of programs submitting for specialty rate, but they were not submitting. We haven't even reviewed a CES in quite a while for that program, for the requests that they had. So they were under the assumption that while the nurse was reviewing, we were also doing this CES review, and which is really the coordinator's responsibility. Your assigned coordinator's responsibility to ensure that they are reviewing the CES and making sure that it's cost effective. And then after they do that, they would need to, if it does need that specialty rate review, it'll then go to the nurse for that review, because she does the medical piece, the medical review portion of it. So instead of having to submit 2 separate packets, this will be just one packet that you'll be submitting for in a case where both needs to be reviewed.
Are there any questions on that? Oh, thank you, Lakeisha. Yes, we tried to you said maybe please repeat the date. This actually this will be going live today. So this will actually be going live today. This form should be up on the AHCCCS website on the digital toolbox. And when it is, I will actually send it out to you guys. I'll send it out from the Tribal ALTCS email and the link to it, so you know exactly where it is.
So Sonia, I think what she means, we have to give them some time. I think when is it going to go into effect? When do they start using this? Because we could be getting some CESs today, and if you say it's going to go online today, they've already submitted the packet. So I think
yeah. Okay, if you've already submitted a packet, a separate packet, then no, don't resubmit. You do not need to do that. So basically, maybe we should just say starting Monday, is that if you've already submitted packets, then you know, for a CES over cost, then no, you do not need to submit another one. But if you are submitting for an ALF behavioral health rate, which you have to do every 3 months, then of course, if you're looking at it and you realize you do not have an approval letter for the CES over cost, then yes, submit both of them together on this one form, and then you don't have to submit 2 different packets.
Sonny, I think we're still going to need to give them some time to get it implemented on their end, because they would have to go back, they would have to train. I don't know if some of them have team meetings of when they would have to introduce this new form. So my fear is that we start getting these forms and on some, and then we're not getting it on some. You know, when is actually, we can't just say today. I think we need to give them a date of when they need to get familiarized. So I would say, you know, they can start using it now. It's on the web. They can start using it. They can start training their team members on it throughout the month of November, but it will, packets will be sent back if they're not including this as of December 1st. I think that gives them plenty of time to get it implemented, because we are seeing a lot that we're not getting packets on where the coordinators are supposed to be reviewing. That's part of our AMPM policy. We really need to have the coordinators review some of these packets, and they're not getting reviewed. Only the nurse is reviewing it, but she's not looking at the CES portion. She's looking at the medical portion of it. So I think we just need to give them some time to implement it, educate their team on it, and roll it out to say, as of this day, we're going to be sending these packets back if this is not included.
Good point. Yes, if you can begin using it now if you're comfortable with that, but yes, let's say December 1st is that it will be implemented, that it will be CES will be returned if it's, you know, for an ALF, not for a home setting, but for an ALF is if it doesn't have this packet. But beginning, you can use it now if you're comfortable with that. If you're not, that's okay. If you need time to like Rachel said, to train, then that's perfectly fine. It will not be required, like without, it will not be returned if you submit a separate CES. But going forward, this is the way it will be implemented. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide. And that's basically that presentation. And I think we are at the end of ours. And so we'll turn it back over to you, Rachel, to close out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. It was really good to have everyone here. I know that we're focusing a lot on the audits right now, where the team has already gone out and they've already started testing the audit tool that we've created, which is kind of just updating the previous tool that we were utilizing before. Now that we're able to use this one form and maybe provide a quicker response to each of the tribes when we do the audit, we're on a time frame too internally to provide that response right away of what your results are after the audit, where we've actually are using our system to do all the calculation for us, do all the findings and the results for us based on what we're putting into the system. So they've already updated it. They've tested the tool with Paskuyaki. Thank you very much for accepting, that we can go out there and do the audit on a couple of cases that we, well, I think there was only 2 cases that they reviewed to test the tool out. It wasn't an actual audit where they were doing any type of, results on it. They were just really testing the tool that they've created, and it looked like it worked perfectly fine with 2 people in the audit tool at the same time, simultaneously entering information in there. So that worked with Paskuyaki. And the next testing that, I don't know if my team has already done the outreach, but they were going to do another testing with Native Health. Then we're going to have 3 people who are actually going to be working with that tool again and trying to, making sure that there's no glitches, making sure that it's calculating correctly, and adding the results on the audit response correctly. So that way you can have all this information at one time. Your leadership can review them and see what the findings are, all on one document versus having to get multiple documents to review what your findings were on each of these cases. So we've, I know one of my brand newest team member, Charlotte, she got in there, started working with the tools and updating that. She's also working on revising with Sonny, working on revising the supervisory audit tool so that it aligns with this new audit tool that we've created. So we're really, really busy in working with that piece of it and making sure that my team is able and ready to go out there and start conducting audits. And that's why we're really focusing on this here, these pieces of the PMMIS screens. It's a lot of work. And I've always say that even internally here at the state level, and then also even with your tribe, that supervisors, all these screens that you're responsible for as a leader, all of these forms that you have to sign off on as a leader and say, is this appropriate? Is this medically necessary? Is this cost effective? When you're doing your audits, when submissions are getting submitted to AHCCCS, as a leader, as a supervisor, you're looking at this, it's time consuming. So it's really hard for supervisors to have caseloads because you have all these other supervisory responsibility, and then being that support to your team and making sure that what you're learning from here, you're taking back with you and you're training your team members. So you're the one that they go to, you're the subject matter expert in this field, and that you're able to provide that support to your team members. So it's a lot of work. So I'm always saying, hey, just be mindful, communicate to your tribal leadership, whoever you report to as leaders, let them know, this is what is in our policy. This is what we have to go by. Whether it's a caseload that is very high, be mindful. There's burnout, and even some supervisors are carrying caseloads that are very, very high. Please speak to your leadership about it, because if you have a caseload, it's so high, you're rushing, your team members need your help, but you don't have the time to help them. It really impacts these services that are provided to our tribal members that are enrolled in these plans. And then it's hard for you to maintain and keep up to date with these changes, with these requests and everything. So these trainings are really, these are some really important parts of the system that you really need to have knowledge in, to where just even the questions that Cheryl had at the beginning, the icebreaker questions that we had, they're all related to the PMMIS system. How well do you know it? As a leader, any time our team members can come to us and ask us a question about the system, or why is this like this? You're looking at a report and you see things. I'm not in it every day, but I have experience enough to look in the system and then compare it to the reportings. It's like, wait a minute, team, what's going on with this? How come you didn't catch this? So as a leader, that's, we have that high level view of what's going on. But if you're carrying a case, and if you're, trying to keep up, it really makes it difficult for you to be that support and catching some of these issues that my team has brought up. This is really happening. This is what we're really seeing. And that's what we're bringing back to you, to let you know, please just be mindful, speak to your leadership, on some of these issues and concerns that happen. And there are always changes that happen. I'm very positive that changes do happen at the tribal level. You do have our reporting to show, as if you need documentation to say, hey, this is what's going on, you do get those weekly reports. You can utilize it however way you want to at least advocate for your team members that report to you. And so that way we're actually basically working together, because the intergovernmental agreement was signed by your leadership, your tribal leadership. We trust that they are listening and hearing and making changes as it happens. And we basically have to leave it at that. So all we can do is provide the training that we have. So far, what we've done today is learning more about the system, getting to know more about how you maneuver, how errors happen, how you can correct those errors. So it's really good to make sure that you continue to follow that. So we have a whole month of implementing that new form that Sonny was talking about. That's really a big piece that is in our AMPM policy, the CES. Many of them have not been reviewed by my team members, and we've only received a few. I mean, just a few. But when we run the reports, it's showing that there are members that are over 80%. Those should be sent to access to the coordinators for review. So that form, you can start using that form. Today, you can just introduce it if you have time to introduce it to your team members, and start having them get familiar with it in the month of November. But as of December 1st, we will need to have that included for the specialty rate ones. If they have a specialty rate, make sure that if it is affecting the CES, or if it's not affecting the CES, you'll use that form to determine, do I need to have this reviewed by both the coordinators and the nurse? And it'll give you that option. But you have, a little bit over 30 days to actually start using that form and training your team members on it. But as of December 1st, those need to be included with your specialty rate request, because we don't want to miss it being reviewed by the coordinators. And then we don't want to request, hey, you submitted it for specialty rate, but we need you to submit another packet for the coordinator. That's just too much work for you all. So we're trying to encompass it all on one form. So as of December 1st, they will be sent back if that form is not included. So please start training your team on that. Thank you. I don't have anything else. Thank you so much for participating and attending. If you need us to reach out to you all and do a one-to-one, we can put it on our calendar. If there's something more that you need more in-depth training on, we're always here to support you all. So just keep in mind that that's what we do here, and making sure that you guys are provided the resources that you need, and making sure that because how your ending results of your audit, that impacts my team too. So if something fails on your end at the audit, that means we didn't do something on our end and we didn't clarify something on our end. So we're all in this together, so just letting you know, just please, take these tools back to your team and work with them, and so that we can all be successful though. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you all have a really good day, and thank your team members, your case managers, for all the hard work that they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. I'll see you later.
I think Lakeisha had a question.
I asked for Cheryl to address it with her.
Oh, okay.
Rachel, can you address that? That's regarding the new
Lakeisha's not on here anymore.
services for the community health representatives and community health workers, if they can build that. And most of them are usually tribal employed with the tribe.
If their services being provided to the long-term care service, to the long-term care member, yes, they should be authorized in the system.
Okay.
Yeah, if they are, because that's what part of the work group was. They were discussing that would need to be in the future. If it is a tribal affiliation that is providing that services, it's still a service. It is still part and a new service that will be provided. So God, that went out so fast too.
Yeah, it did. Sonny, do you think you can put out an email to everybody? Because it's going to involve all the tribes.
Yeah, I thought that notification has already gone out to them by the decision workers that had made that decision. So I need to probably contact our education team to provide that notification out.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody. I think we're going to do a debrief after this. So I'm going to quickly do one really quick. So I'm going to send everybody an invite. Thank you.
Thank you.